Hey there. Gosh, I forgot to add myself to the stream. Sorry about that blank screen there for just a second. Let me just share my window here. There we go. I can come a little bit bigger. There we go. That's a little better balance. Well, happy Friday to you. Boy, do we have an interesting one for you today. This is Friday, December 17th, and it's a very special Ask Self Recruiter today. In case you are struggling in your work with your resume, your LinkedIn, your interviews, your process itself, your messaging, send any questions that you have on any obstacles you're running into to ask@selfrecruiter.com. That's ask@selfrecruiter.com. All the best questions will be included right here. If you've not seen me before, this is John Crant. Hi, nice to meet you. You may be joining us on YouTube or over on Facebook, or maybe watching on LinkedIn, a couple other platforms as well. Now, let's see. Expert on job search, 7 or 8 years in outside recruitment. That's a traditional headhunter on a desk, learning to go into the competitor, lure out that very, very best person. Of course, I'm also a resume and LinkedIn guru. I have a full pre-press background before any of my recruiting background. And of course, the last 10, 12 years, I've worked one-on-one with clients, really helping them improve their resumes, improve their outcomes in job search. More about that a little bit later. You know, this is about taking control as we're going after a new job. And the thing that really holds us back, typically, or at least the very first thing that holds us back, is the resume. It doesn't really represent the story that we've lived. Somehow it evolved, however it evolved, and now we're kind of stuck with this albatross around our neck. Let me be clear. If your resume is delivering the interviews that you are after, likely don't need to change it. But for most individuals, it's not delivering the interviews that you expect to be getting. There is something wrong with the way you're telling your story. So we're going to handle 21 questions all about resume. If you'd like more detail on how to really make your resume sing, all the secrets that a recruiter uses to make a resume really great, check out my resume renovation lecture. It'll help you a lot. Here's 21 questions all on resume. Why is a resume still important? I'm assuming we mean because of the digital nature of the world today. Well, the resume tends to be let's call it the career calling card. So yes, in my view, and everything I'm teaching you today is my opinion, it needs to be a very short, succinct telling of our story. So interesting that it's captivating. They can't wait to speak with us. It's important because it tends to still be the first point of notice about us. Not always. They might notice us on LinkedIn, or they might notice us from our social media activity if we're running a marketing campaign for our job search on LinkedIn. By the way, if you're not sure how to do that, check out my career evolution lecture. I walk you through the entire process. But basically, that's why resume is still important. It is the first point of controlling our story. Next question. What mistakes should I try to avoid when writing my resume? There are so many mistakes to list. I'm not sure what to tell you. The overall biggest failure in every resume I look at is the complete failure to consider something called information architecture. Now, I live in New York City. I'm in a 21-story building. Not very impressive building, but it's still a 21-story building. You just can't build that thing. You have to have someone decide everything. How should the water work, the drainage, the electric? How do all the components fit together? That's architecture. Well, in terms of your resume, what if they only read 15% of your resume, or 30% for you? You're very, very lucky. 10% for you. Which 30, 10, 15% would you like them to read? That's really up to you. So we do have to think about how we can be very, very succinct on our resume, but there's a lot of other clarifying questions coming up, so we're not going to dig too deep into that one. What resume format should I use? Well, there's a number of resume formats out there, a lot of resume books out there showing lots of formats that are from decades and decades ago. Those formats will not work. Oh, some of them still look pretty. Oh, this is nice looking. It is nice looking. Are you going to hang it on the wall and no one's ever going to look at it? Or would you like it to become a sales document that delivers that next opportunity to you? So in terms of a format that works, there's really only, let's distill down to the two basic formats. And that is a chronological format and a functional format. Chronological format, just like it says, follows time. For some of us, that may not work. We may have large gaps. We may have other things we're trying to hide by using a functional format. Anybody that knows what they're looking at on a resume, the moment they see a functional resume, they understand this person's trying to hide something. What are they trying to hide? Where's their defect? So there's no case I'll ever recommend a functional resume. It's always a chronological resume, but we have to understand what we put into the resume and what we may leave out. And that's a question still to come. Anything to consider when listing my name? Is it clear? Is it understandable? Getting into a touchy area here. I've certainly worked with both as a coach and as a recruiter, worked with lots and lots of folks that have unusual names, or at least unusual to me. What is unusual? Unfamiliar is probably a better way to say it. And most of the time, that's not a problem. Where it does become a problem is when they don't know what to do next. I have sat next to really great recruiters going through a stack of resumes, getting to this one resume. They go, oh, I love this background. They haven't even looked at the name yet. And then they look up and their heart withers and melts away because they don't know how to pronounce the name. They don't know who to ask for. Sometimes they don't even know whether they're asking for a male or female. And then they set it to the side because of their own insecurities. So kind of naturally leads into this next question. What if my name is hard to pronounce or it fails to clarify my gender? By the way, those things are up to you and you should do what you'd like. This is a very tricky area to give advice in. I can tell you one of my clients has a very difficult name from a Western perspective. They're from Korea and their first name is Kitae. That is Kitae. And everybody looks at that and they're like, Kitty, or I don't know what to ask for. Well, that person is male, by the way, so they don't want to be called Kitty. It's Kitae. And yet no one can ever pronounce that. And there's all this ambiguity and that resume might end up off to the side. So years ago, when they realized this difficulty existed, they thought to themselves, how do I eliminate it? How do I eliminate this issue? And they looked down to their little nephew and said, oh, I like the name my nephew got, which was Daniel. And they simply put the word Daniel in front of their name. So it goes Daniel, Kita, and their last name. HR paperwork, of course, they put their legal name, but everything else, they put the name they go by professionally, where everyone can relate to them and interact with them and pick up the phone and invite them in for interview. These are issues you should think about. As far as gender also, there is absolutely nothing wrong in the modern world with also putting your pronouns on your resume if you'd like. That helps clarify as well. What contact information should I include? Well, gosh, I'm glad you asked. As little as possible. Don't need 123 any street because we don't hire you because you live there. Yes, we would like to probably see your city and state, but that could even go by the wayside if you have too much else to share. Maybe you have not only a LinkedIn address line, which you of course should share, but kicking the city state out of the way because you have too many things. You might also have a portfolio site and you might have even some third site. And you want to showcase your Instagram to show off your creativeness. That might take up a lot of contact information. For normal individuals, it's a single line of contact information, starting with your LinkedIn URL, followed by your city, state, followed by your email, followed by your cell phone number. That is it. That is your cell phone number, not your home phone number. I don't care that you can't get your cell phone in your home. That's a separate issue. That's what belongs on there. Notice the two things on the outside are the things I'd like them to interact with. Phone number's easiest to get to, top right. If you're already holding the resume convinced, pick up the phone and call me. Not quite convinced, second easiest thing to get to is top left, LinkedIn URL. Lots more of that in my resume renovation lecture. Be sure to take a look at that. Next question, should I include a career objective? What would I like to be someday? Nobody actually cares. Well, I care, but nobody else cares. Nobody cares. So what you want to grow into someday is no longer of interest. This is a date. We do not want to hear about your someday, some now. What we want to hear about is us, our company, our team. What is it about us that attracts you to us? So In place of this career objective, which kind of goes off of that track, I recommend taking all that clutter, and we'll talk a little bit more about clutter that tends to collect at the top of a not a good resume. Take all that clutter up there, toss it out the window, and repurpose that space for something I call a positioning title. And that is exactly a bullseye for every single job you ever send that resume to. If you didn't connect those dots, the right resume never changes because you've worked through to get to the right version. The only thing that actually ever changes is the top positioning title. So when they pick up your resume out of that stack, they go, oh, it's just what I'm looking for. Yes, invite me in for interview. Next question, how can I get ready for a change in my career or industry? Let's look at something dramatic. Let's imagine you've been somehow related to the IT side of the equation, very technical, project management, all of that background. Maybe you've done it for a host of dazzling brands, this, that, the other one. Everyone goes, wow, must know everything. But now you no longer would like to go down that track. Maybe you'd like to take all of that project management that you've built up, all that expertise there, and maybe go apply it a different way. It doesn't matter that it was applied technically before. Oh yeah, they're going to go, well, we don't need a technical person. Have to change their mindset. What you're really selling now in that case would be project management, not a technical piece. Get rid of that. Get rid of that. Then you have to pitch yourself as a technical management guru, helping organizations to streamline their efficiency. And then, like my lecture next week, starting on Monday, which is marketing yourself to the decision maker, reach directly out to that decision maker and whisper into their ears about how you can transform their business. They will want that conversation. HR will have no idea what to do with you. So get ready essentially by going back to every single employer and maybe rethinking the angle of the story. In this person's example case, less technical talk, much more on the project management, getting things to fruition. A little bit shift in story. The rest happens in conversation. Let's talk about the next question. Do I need more than one version of my resume? I believe I just answered that in the last question. No. Yes, years ago I thought, oh, you have to have a different resume for each one. We have to rework the story every single time. I understand that. But if you work through the right amount of iterations to get to the correct resume, I think that's 3, 4, 5 iterations to get to really the best of the best version. When you're at the best version, it doesn't change. What does change is that positioning title at the very top. So every single time it chameleons to a new target or new target or new target, which might bring up a different question of what to do on the LinkedIn side. And yes, your LinkedIn has to properly support each version of the resume that's out there while not undermining any of the versions. And all of that is really handled in the about or summary section and how you position yourself on LinkedIn. Next question on resume. What should I include on my resume? Well, if you're asking me what I would like on a resume, I'm so glad you asked. I would like a resume to be complete from the time you entered the workforce to today. Were you listening? I said that's what I'd like. I did not say that would be appropriate for you. In most cases, that is what I want to see. But if your career goes back to 1972, I don't need to see the 70s. May not even need to see the 80s now that we're into the 20s, but still might like to. Let's not be too quick to cut off the background. As we mature in our career, we get a little fearful about that end of it, but that is also why we are more valuable than anybody else. It's perspective that others cannot bring. So what you include or don't include is all up to you. It simply comes down to this. Whatever is on that sheet of paper must be absolutely letter true, cannot be called into question. And then you can leave out any part of the story you'd like. There is no sin of omission here. Gosh, I grew up Catholic, know all about negotiating sin. There's no sin of omission here, only sin of commission. I can leave out any part I'd like as long as every single piece here is absolutely letter true. Next question, how should I use my keywords on my resume? You know, such a big thing. Oh, I need keywords. I need keywords. I've heard about keywords. Let's put a block. By the way, in my LinkedIn lecture, I do teach how to put a keyword block over on LinkedIn. You know why? Because we have really no space limitations. We're not handcuffed by the space over there. and we can seed that little bit of extra information. But in my view, and maybe that's even coming up here, in my view, I think a resume has to be a single sheet of paper in all cases. There's no exception to that in my view. Or you don't know how to edit your story. You're telling too much. Save it for conversation, for gosh sakes. So I wouldn't put a keyword block on a resume. What you need to do is make sure to use the correct keywords while telling your story in the most effective way possible. Let me mention something else I have not said so far, which is certainly in my resume renovation lecture. And that is, if I'm reinventing a client's resume, there's not a single sentence anywhere on the resume. Why would I have a sentence on a resume in a world where people no longer read? You have to free yourself of sentence structure, get rid of all that extra verbiage, let it distill down to something incredibly laser focused and succinct that they can absorb because of very, very creative formatting just by glancing at it. I teach all of that in my resume renovation lecture. Next question is, how long should a resume be? Gosh, I knew this one was in here somewhere. Single sheet of paper in all cases. Now, I happened to be giving my LinkedIn lecture at the New York State Department of Labor a couple of years ago, and resume comes up because these are both marketing documents that are related. And how do you discuss one without the other sometimes? And I happened to mention resume, single sheet of paper in all cases. Someone like this guy in back explodes. Like, come on. What if you got a 30-year career? It's never going to fit. And you've been a CEO. Okay, I get it. But I don't think your unhappiness is because you don't really like my answer. I think your unhappiness is because you find yourself sitting in the Department of Labor going, well, what am I doing here? How could they not see my value? Not a surprise. This person hired me. They send me their stuff. It's 6 pages of my eyes bleeding. Oh, those folks that like that CV format. Most of them are not employed because the CV format really no longer works. There may still be people in your field that go, oh, I want a CV format. If they'd like to be hired, they need a single sheet resume. It's a sales sheet that sparks desire, makes them jump out of their chair for you. Of course, this CEO was very impressive. CEO and COO before that and CFO before that. 30 years of endless career, could not just stop talking about, didn't know how to edit. By the time you build that type of background, almost all the detail can come out and just the employer titles go on the page, almost like emerald, diamond, ruby, drop of perfume. Wow. CEO again, of course. You never fit that on a single sheet of paper. Boom, exclamation point. It fits. Single sheet of paper. No time ever I'll tell a client that it's okay to really have a 2-page resume. That all that indicates is a complete lack of confidence in your story. Resume is to set up the conversation, not to answer the entire conversation. In my view, everything here. Which certifications or licenses should I include? All of them. But I got a real estate license like 10, 15 years ago, and I don't have anything to do with real estate now. So we forget. We have baggage over these turns that we've made in our career that somehow we didn't know what we want it to be today, 20 years ago or 10 years ago or whatever it might have been. This journey creates who we are today. It's not about editing the journey so you look sterile or cookie cutter. It's showcasing how you're interesting, how you're unique, how your brain goes after things. So I don't really care if it's a massage therapy license. I want it all there because those are the interesting parts. Let's assume that you are capable and qualified for the jobs that you're going after. By the way, I cannot make it capable and qualified, but if you're capable and qualified for the jobs you're going after, it should come down to chemistry above all other things and confidence in you above all other things in chemistry. And that's before the credentialing, the background, everything you've done. So what it really comes down to, if I sense you're capable and qualified, then it comes down to the 2 reasons I actually make a hiring decision. Number 1 is chemistry. This is all about who you are. Why are you interesting? What makes you tick, which could have something to do with your work life and work product, or could have nothing to do with it. Why is that so important? Because if I hire you, I'm going to spend my waking life with you, more time with you than with my loved ones. That's why we want to like you. It's really that simple. Include all these little tidbits that may be interesting. Let me give you an extreme example. A few years back, I was working with an individual terrific marketing background, all this career progression. I'm like, wow, that's a great story. I love it. But some earlier iteration of this person, they'd become, it was a gal, by the way, they'd become a certified locomotive engineer, like choo-choo train, choo-choo. And it's like, oh my gosh, that was hidden off. Get that turd off my resume, get it out in the background. You better believe the version I created had the tremendous marketing background, the education, everything else. And right below the education degree was 7-point bold certified locomotive engineer. At first, you're like, oh, get it off, get it off. I'm like, that is why you're going to get a host of interviews, because you just have lost sight that your resume is on the table with 5 or 6 other really dazzling people. They're looking for who's interested. Oh my gosh, look at that. Oh, I have to, no, put on the list. Oh, that's a nice background too. No, put it on the list. I have to hear that story. Don't leave out the good parts. That is why you're going to be hired. I know it's hard for us to think about that. Should I include hobbies and interests? Yes, as long as they're not scandalous, of course. But yes, this is part of what creates you. Another story, this is about 3 Octobers ago. I was just finishing up a client's resume, LinkedIn, putting little finishing touches on it. And suddenly at the end of the month, they're going, oh, I'm about to be a 4-time marathon runner next week. I'm like, what? You're about to be a 4-time marathon runner? This is the first time John's hearing about it? Well, that doesn't have anything to do with my career. It doesn't? You seem like you're getting a little mature to me. What does a 4-time marathon runner communicate? Unstoppable, goal-driven. Oh my gosh, probably really good on my healthcare costs. They think about it all. I've certainly heard them discussing it all behind the scenes over the years. We have to think about everything. Again, why are you interesting? What makes you tick? Hobbies and interests? Absolutely, I'm going to have it there. Interesting, incredible travel, of course, shows wonderful exposure to different cultures, and maybe your perceptiveness is even a little bit better than the others. Should I include a list of references on my resume? If you'd like to not get the job. Let's be clear here. I'm a big believer in there's only one appropriate time for you to hand over references. And that's when they say the magic words. I'd like to consider making you an offer. I need your references. Great. They've decided really upon you. Now is the time to disclose your private reference list. The reason why we do not disclose this earlier, even though they ask for it, is because sometimes the reference gets hired, or someone that the reference mentions in discussion gets hired. You need to get hired. References do not belong on a resume, and references provided, reference to be provided, none of that belongs on the resume, or you just don't have confidence. Wait for them to ask for the reference. That's my advice. Next question, better to be a specialist on my resume or a generalist? Wow, that is a very tough one for every field to answer. There are advantages to both. Advantages to being very, very specialized, especially if you're in a hot little area where that skill set gets very, very desired. That causes salaries in that special little area to skyrocket. But also, the further up the food chain we go, the more we typically really need to be the generalist, or we don't have the right perspective to interact. So you're going to have to think about creating that balance, and you can't necessarily become one from the other, although you can slowly morph in that direction. Next question, what should I include or leave off on my resume? Whatever you'd like to. By the way, there's no rules here. The only rule is simple. Whatever is on the resume must be absolutely lettered true. I can also leave out any part that I'd like to leave out. This is not a confessional document. This is a sales document to sell your background. You disclose only what you decide to disclose. Next question, list my company names or my job titles first. Gosh, I've seen it done both ways so many times over the years, but it's really clear. We misunderstand how our value is calculated. Your value is almost exclusively determined by the companies you've worked for. And yet a lot of people put their title bold right in front of the company name. Like, okay, but the company is what determines your value in conjunction with your title. So always the company name first, always your job title second. hopefully packaged in a nice little pair with a little space between, served up on a platter, because that's what they want, employer title, so they can make a decision about you. A lot more detail on how that should be presented over in my resume renovation lecture. Check that out. Next question, should I list my work achievements? Well, I'd certainly hope so, but it's a trap also, because we have some people that are a little OCD. And by the way, I'm a little OCD. It's all in how you channel it. But they're so OCD, they have to have credit for everything. No, I have to have credit for everything. There's a long list of achievements. And they get about this far through the list that because we didn't edit. We diluted our own story. So it's really the best of the best of the best. These should be the nugget of gold, the drop of perfume, ruby, diamond, emerald. You get the idea. Only the best of the best representative, so everything is rich. Next question, how can I not look like a job hopper when I've moved a few times? It can be very difficult, very difficult. I just happened to be looking at someone's resume yesterday, and we won't mention organization or name, but this person has had, probably about, I think there were about 7 or 8 jobs on the resume. Their career is not very long, by the way. 7 or 8 jobs on the resume, but every single job on the resume is a dazzler for a dazzling organization. But the problem is every single job was 8 to 13 months, with the exception of one which happened to squeeze out to 2 years. So this person, while they have collected a brand list that's quite incredible, I'm quite impressed myself looking at it. But the first thought is, well, how could they actually ever have seen anything to fruition, leaving every 8 to 12 to 13 months? Big question marks there. That person has a bigger challenge because it's everything on the resume. Most people have 2 or 3 of these items on the resume where they may have moved quickly. What you might consider is taking those 2 or 3 short stints and pulling them under one consulting banner, having your individual employers for that time frame be the bullet points. Yep, that's a little bit of a gray area in storytelling, but it will also make you look much more stable. And over the years, I've certainly helped a lot of clients with that type of an issue on their resume. Any other advice? Gosh, my favorite last question here. Take control today. We procrastinate forever. That's the nature of human beings for the most part. Not all of us, but certainly quite a lot of us. So there's so many people that I talk about or talk with about all their challenges that I see in their background. And the most painful thing to me is they tend to hire me 3, 4, and 5 months after our conversation. And you can imagine how much deeper the pain is 3, 4, and 5 months later. Let's put one foot in front of the other and start today. Start improving your resume right now. There's no cost to go watch the resume renovation lecture, use it as a tutorial, and take your resume as far as you can take it on your own. If you cannot quite get it to the place you really know it should be, then I certainly know who you should work with. Check out my packages over my Self-Recruiter website, just under the Services tab. And if you're not sure which one is the right one for you, send me a quick email. We'll set up a time to talk. I can give you some other advice as well. Lot to think about on resumes, and don't forget that it's not just one quick run through to create a wonderful resume. If that's your first version, probably need the 3, 4, 5, 6 iterations. Watch the resume renovation lecture. That will help you an awful lot. Get your job search questions answered. If we're not answering the questions that you would like, send them in. Send it to ask@selfrecruiter.com. That's ask@selfrecruiter.com. Send in your questions. Best ones are always included here. And no matter what you're focused on improving right now, whether it's resume, LinkedIn, interviewing, your conversational style, take control of the discussion, understanding these small changes change everything. Take that first step and repeat, 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 repeat. Don't let somebody else think for yourself. Thank you guys for joining in today. Monday, very special lecture on Monday. This is marketing yourself to the decision maker, really getting yourself all ramped up for the new year. Yes, we can click apply, submit, and send it off to HR and probably never hear back again, maybe sometimes. Or we can take control and we can use our brain power like I teach in my LinkedIn lecture, and we can reverse search the company, get right to the decision maker, whispering right into their ears our value. Hope you have a great weekend. There is one more Ask Self Recruiter next week. That I believe it's on Wednesday, but we'll see. Whatever's on my calendar. Calendar, of course, is at selfrecruiter.com, and just click the calendar tab. See you next week. Hope you have a great weekend.